to make the loan realizable, whether in local or foreign currency. And Madam President, if I may be permitted to look at the actual agreement, what strikes and is important to note is that the interest rate is 2%, and that is an attractive rate, especially in today's commercial reality, and that there is an additional charge of 0.5% paid to meet administrative expenses and the expenses of implementing the agreement. I also note that there is 0.5% to be paid with relation to section 3.02 of the agreement that makes provisions for special irrevocable commitments. And so I ask for clarification. Since this loan, it has already gone, the actual contract has already gone before us, I seek clarification on whether or not there has been any special irrevocable commitment, and if so, what? And who is the beneficiary of such a commitment? I also note that in section 109 of the agreement, 1.09, sorry, the loan shall be paid at Kuwait or such other places as the fund shall reasonably request. And then it goes on to speak to the borrower being Belize, being responsible for costs attendant to repayment and what conversions may be. So the bigger question for me, Madam President, is we're borrowing 4 million Kuwaiti dinar, but from Article 1 and Article 2 and how they set out servicing the loan agreement, I would really like to be made the wiser whether or not inherent in those terms, the reason why those terms are set out that way is because there is an additional cost to actually service the loan agreement. And if there is an additional cost, what that is. Because when we hear that it is 4 million Kuwaiti dollars and the equivalent is about 13 million Belize US dollars, 13.04, I think, perhaps. What is not in that is any sum that arises out of servicing the loan. And I make reference to section 2.02, section 2.04, what I must point out that as much as it is sad, as Senator Faber has pointed out, that we have been straitjacket to provide satisfaction of how we're going to use the sums, what I like is that it is written in black and white, as is seen in section 3.03, that everything beginning from accessing the loan and withdrawing from the loan must be done in writing, and that in section 303, and when you look 304, 305, there are provisions that provide for a transparent mechanism to show what is being accessed, the amount, what it is being accessed for, the documentation that has to be supplied to justify what is being accessed at those stages. And so, I mean, in as much as we're here borrowing again, and we shouldn't be borrowing, at least the loan agreement has in it some safeguards to say these things are there, to show that there is a transparent way to account and document how these funds will be used and what for. And the agreement is very specific that the funds ought not be used for any other purpose but for the one to which it is sought, which is for the road. what I would want to encourage the government of Belize is that those very documents that they have to prepare and supply in order to access the funds at varying stages, make them public. Let us see them. Let it not be only within the Ministry of Finance. Let it not only be in the Ministry of Infrastructural Development and Housing. Let us see it. I mean, without going into the budget debate, this being Plan Belize 2.0, where is the good governance 2.0 with this transparency and accountability? Let's walk the walk. So all of these documents, that lends to at least the kind of quieting of the knee-jerk reaction to we're here again borrowing. So when we can see what we're borrowing, when we can understand why we're borrowing, and when we can trace every cent, it gives us a little bit of relief. So I would implore on the government to and not only for this fund, for any other loan facility, engage a PR campaign, so to speak, so that we see it in the public, we can digest it, we can follow it. And you know what? Doing just that assists the public to understand who are the players behind these loans. So for example, I would like to know when the loans, when the monies are being spent, and it is being spent on goods and services attendant to the loan, I want to know where are they getting the materials from for the road? Who owns the company that they're getting the materials from for the road? Who is the contractor? Who is the engineer and the site supervisor? What are the days that they're working? Who all are on site on those days? Because we need to know whenever something goes wrong, whenever there's a shift in the road, a sinkhole, you know, these are the people who were supposed to be there to ensure quality. And the loan agreement does just that, you know, Madam President. The loan agreement says that there should be quality assurance mechanism put in place, and those things should be reduced to writing and satisfied to the Kuwaiti loan agreement so that they know that when we say we're borrowing this money and accessing this money, it is being done above board. So borrowing, not so good, but at least with this loan, there are being things put in place. It is in black and white to say that, hey, we want to see that you're doing what you're supposed to do with the money. There are no monies that, you know, can go anywhere, seep out, anything like that. So show the public. We want to see it. The loan provides for it, and we expect that the people of Belize are supposed to see what this loan is providing for. So when we buy into such a loan agreement on these terms, we know and we can see the loan at work. What I like also is, oh, and I need to ask Senator Cowie, I see the term, the acronym PEU. I don't know what that is, so if you could please explain when you rise. Oh, thank you. You don't need to do it. I know what it is. In section 4.02, it says the borrower shall make or cause to be made available promptly as needed all other sums which shall be required in addition to the loan for carrying out the project. All such sums to be made available on terms and conditions satisfactory to this fund. And I don't know that I understand what other such sums that could be, and if you could please give me an example of that and what should be required. Because I find that it's a whole lot more palatable when we know. Take the veil off these things. What I like is section 407 that says the ministry is tasked to maintain records adequate to identify the goods financed out of the proceeds of the loan, to disclose the use thereof. I made reference to that before, but there it is in section 4.07. In section 4.08, it makes reference to goods imported. And forgive me, I don't know engineer or builder of road. I don't know Bob the builder. What goods are envisaged to be imported to build the road? Because in 4.08, it makes reference to insuring or cause to be insured with responsible insurers all goods financed out of the proceeds of the loan and those subject to marine transit and other hazard incident to purchase and importation of goods into the territory. So what is being imported? And two, since the clause provide that those should be insured, which insurance company has been engaged to provide the insurance and at what rate? And since you have to do that insurance, that again lends to my question, what is the total cost of actually getting this loan? Because the borrower, being Belize, has to meet those costs, not from the Kuwaiti loan. And I don't know, we're on the cusp of the hurricane season, starting tomorrow, and in all reasonableness, such insurance must cover acts of God and whatnot. And we know how these insurance go. They will take the rates sky high, and I would hope that the government could show us that they actually shopped all the insurance agencies to see what attractive rates and go with the cheapest one. So it's just a matter of providing the Belizean public with everything that this loan contemplates ought to be done. I also like, Madam President, Section 409 that says the ministry is to furnish to the fund quarterly from the date of commencement periodic reports on the status of the project in project execution in comparison to the programs already set therefore. Transparency. The agreement makes provision for updating on what is being done, how it is being done. And so we want to see that. In that same section 409, it says the borrower and the fund shall from time to time exchange views through their representatives with regards to matters relating to the purposes of the loan and the maintenance of the service thereof. The borrower shall promptly inform the fund of any condition which interferes or threatens to interfere with the accomplishment of the purposes of the loan, including substantial increase in the cost of the project or maintenance of the service thereof. And without going into the budget and the forecast, we can appreciate that we exist in an environment where what it would cost to complete the project yesterday is not what it would cost to complete the project tomorrow. And what is definitive is that the loan is for $4 million only. And since it is that costs can shift going forward, what is the government doing or plan to do or has envisaged in anticipation of that, and how will they plug that gap? And it may only amount to $100,000, and that seems like peanuts in relation to $4 million. But it's a lot. And it makes a difference for us to know that you are thinking ahead, you're planning, because that is the task of the government, to ensure that when we meet what may be a crisis, that we're able to handle the crisis. Not saying that inflation and the cost of goods will be a crisis moment, but the point is, what is there that has been envisaged, and how is it that that will be addressed? Because this represents 47% only of the entire works. It is hope that it can be accessed for the additional 57%. But what is clear to me is that the loan tasks the government with an active continuing responsibility to ensure that they not only do as they say they are going to do, but they also ensure that they can successfully accomplish what they set out to do within the confines of this loan, and that those things, contingencies, are on the foot of the borrower, not the fund. Section 413, and forgive me, I don't know much about vehicle, and I know they attempt to speak like I am a mechanic, but 414 makes provisions that the government should take necessary measures to ensure that the dimensions and axle loads of vehicles using the road in the country consistent with structural and geometric design of these roads, and to that end shall institute and maintain an effective axle load control system and enforce the prescribed axle load regulations and policies. Do we have that? Do we have that already? And if we do, what is that? Is this road being built to the capacity to handle our dump trucks and our buses and what have you? I would really, really like to know, because I don't know that we are those societies where we're at the place where we can route big trucks a different highway than the ones everybody uses. So, and that is important. Why it is important? Because there is contemplation by the agreement that yes, you can build this road, and this road has to be built with specifications, but if you use it in such a way, you will diminish the value of the project you sought to get and the value of the loan. So what the loan agreement is saying, hey, you have a responsibility to ensure that the purpose of this loan will not be destroyed or damaged within a short space of time because you've not directed your mind to how it is to be used. So what axle load control system do we have? I don't know. There is, as far as I know, and I tried to check, we don't. The closest I've come is, without trying to preempt any future discussions on future bills, the farthest I know is that we are contemplating assigning what I consider taxation by axle to vehicles using the road, but I don't know that there is anything to say that vehicles by axles can or cannot use a particular highway. So I think that is serious concern for us, and why I point it out is because many a times perhaps we can extend the life of some of our roads if we do some kind of axle load control system and manage the vehicles that use some of the roads and streets, because that contribute to breaking up the roads. I can tell you, when in downtown Belize City, if there is any disruption to the flow of traffic on Albert Street or Regent Street, the buses that would normally use those main thoroughfares are sent into the neighborhoods nearby, and when those buses are running down there, you can hear the vibration and the shake of the homes from the buses on the road. And the use of the road in and of itself contribute to the breakdown and destruction of the road. Mind you, the weather and water. So that is important, and I would like to know that even though this cart done gone before the horse, that before we get to completion, at least there is something. And when there is something, it contemplates and envisages that there is an alternate route for any vehicle that is not fit for use of the road, that would destroy the road and shorten the life of the purpose of the loan. Also in 4.14, it speaks to an environmental compliance plan. And I'd like to know whether or not that has been drafted, whether or not it's in place. So my observations in relation to the axle load program is that tractors and rollers and heavy equipment and metal truck, like those really should not use the highway. But then again, what other highway do we have for them to use? So what are we doing then? We're to have an axle load plan, that would not destroy or shorten the life of the road by the fund. But we don't have an alternate road. If it is, we have an axle road plan that would exclude them. Where do they go? So what are we doing? We're borrowing $4 million to fix from La Democracia to Belmont Pan for what? 2 short years, 3 short years? What is the life if we continue to have these vehicles operate on a road that perhaps they shouldn't? That is a real concern for me, because I would like to know if we're agreeing to borrow $4 million, it's $4 million that would go into good use for as long, I mean, it can be into perpetuity, but for as long as possible. So, Madam President, I say with caution, the loan is attractive. Whether we want to have the knee-jerk reaction to the borrowing, which I do, and it is justified, I would really invite the government of Belize to appreciate the burdens and responsibilities this loan agreement is placing on them and ensure that they can discharge it, and discharge it publicly so that we can see and we can know. And when things go wrong, not like the new bridge where just after completion a little bit of it was lifting and people are asking about how and who and why. This loan, the way it is drafted is done in a way that we'll be able to know how and who and why. And so, Madam President, without belaboring any of those points, and I look forward to Senator Kawai responding and providing some of the answers, I would like to caution the government that in as much as you can fetch a loan with such an attractive interest rate, it would be wise to sit back and consider whether or not you're not setting up yourself for failure and you're not looking further than your eye can see past your nose, because something like this and the terms that comes with it places a great responsibility and burden, and one for which we will be watching. And we shouldn't have to resort to the Freedom of Information Act to see and know and find out, because the people of Belize deserve to know, deserve to see, and deserve to understand that when these sovereign debt pass on to their child and their child's child, they can say, see that beautiful road there? That is it. We're paying taxes because of that beautiful road. And that beautiful road is going to survive my generation and the generation after me. Thank you, Madam President.
I recognize Senator Denison.
Thank you, Madam President. Welcome back to all the honorable members of this House, and welcome to the new members as well. Madam President, I am on record. I'll be very brief, Madam President, I promise. I am on record in this honorable House for at least 3 things that are now relevant: transparency and good governance, competency in the ministries, and the need to fix, maintain, and repair our road network. I have stood here and I have tried my best to drive those points home. On that basis, I see no need to repeat, but I will align and adopt the transparency and good governance aspects of Senator from the other side and move straight on to the other issues. Madam President, something really remarkable happened earlier this week in Parliament. In the lower house. Because up here we're used to criticism from this side, right? To this side. But in the lower house, you don't really get that. It's over there to this side, but it's noteworthy that a little bit of that came from someone from this side. And why is much being said about it? Because thinking people are not afraid to share their ideas. To say when things are going well and to say when things aren't. And so I use that, Madam President, as the backdrop to say that I have absolute confidence in the area rep for Kaya South and the Minister of MIDH that we are get a nice road. I use that also, Madam President, to say that the Ministry of Finance has clearly outdone themselves with the nature of this contract and the concessionary rates that are attracted to it. I think it's applaudable and we must acknowledge when good is being done. So kudos to the Minister responsible for Finance and this loan agreement. It's one of the best that I have seen, and I again align with the transparency issues. I think that ties it together even more so to assure the Belizean people that we are going to get value for money. So kudos, Mr. Minister of Finance and Minister of State and the Minister of Finance and my colleague in this House. As it relates to fixing and maintaining the roads, Madam President, I was pleasantly surprised to hear that a minister responsible for road networks was able to tell us how much miles of road networks we have, how much of it is paved, how much of it is gravel, how much of it is dirt road. I think that's important because it's not until you are aware of what you have to maintain that you can start coming up with a plan to maintain it and then try to execute that plan in a way that would allow the government to have a leaf flex, but also to provide the goods and services that the people need. And so I want to commend the Minister for MIDH because I will say this, the road construction didn't stop after the election, Madam President, and I was just so happy to see that. Like there was this fury, like, and rave to fix roads and make the city and the country look good just before the election, but it didn't stop. And so I don't want it to stop, Madam President. I want it to continue. I want it to roll out. And so it is for those reasons, Madam President, that I stand in support of this loan motion.
I recognize Senator Christopher Cowie.
Thank you, Madam President. I was hoping that I wouldn't be put in a spotlight like this, but unfortunately it seems that turns out not to be the case. In connection with this loan and preface with the comments of Senator Faber, you spoke to some macro numbers before we get into the the resolution itself or the motion itself, the loan motion. And I think it's important to have a response on that. With respect to debt, certainly on the matter of debt, that I think you use the number 4.6 billion in 2020, and that as of the end of 2024, the debt was 4.4 billion. So the debt has largely not increased over the period of almost 5 years. In fact, the numbers you use, or you said the IMF uses, indicates it actually went down a bit. What's interesting is from 2008, and I'm just strictly speaking about debt, from 2008, what was the debt? Do you remember what was the debt back in 2008? I think from the numbers I have, it was the external debt was 1.9 billion, and the domestic debt was roughly 330 million. So a total of about 2.2 billion, roughly 2.2 billion. And the number you use, you said the IMF uses as of 2020 is 4.6 billion. So in that period from 2008 to 2020, how much did it increase? It more than doubled. The debt more than doubled. It increased by $2.4 billion. In 12 years, you're basically borrowing $200 million a year. That's the experience of the past UDP administration. $2.4 billion. And you are now speaking of a reduction from 4.6 to 4.4 billion and claiming that this is disastrous. I am shocked that you would even try to raise this as an issue. And to put on top of it, look at the GDP. What was the GDP? The GDP of the whole country. In 2020, it was roughly $4 billion. So that's why when you talk about debt to GDP, we were 130% or whatever percent, but it definitely was more than 100%. We owed more than our overall income for the year at that point in time. So $4 billion. In 2008, what was the GDP then? Roughly $3.5 billion. $3.5 billion. So what happened between 2008 and 2020? It flipped. You had GDP a little more than the debt, 3.5 billion, as opposed to the debt being 2.2. Now, by 2020, we had a GDP only 500 million increase. Only 500 million increase in 12 years in the overall income of the country, from 3.5 to 4 billion, 500 million increase. But yet the debt went up by $2.4 billion. Where did that money go? Where did that money go? It certainly didn't go towards the enhancement and the upliftment of the people, because they didn't get richer. What was the per capita GDP, the average income per person? The average income per person. In 2020, it was $10,000, roughly $10,000. In 2008, it was actually higher. The average income per person was $11,000. I'm just using wrong numbers. I could give you the specific number, but it was higher. It was 11,000. It was more than 11. It was $11,335. So what does the last administration, the UDP administration, what do they have to show for their 12 to 13 years in government, a reduction in the average income per person. People became poorer. Evidently, people became poorer. That's the past. But let's look at between 2020 and 2024. So we just spoke about the debt, but we also can speak about the income, the GDP. And I mentioned that the income was $4 billion in 2020. You know what the income is as at the end of 2024? 6.8 billion. 6.8 billion. So we went up 2.8 billion. We went up 2.8 billion. An increase of 67%. The average per capita income went from $10,000 to over $16,000. Over 60% increase in the average income per capita. So in that period of time, the ordinary man benefited. He did not suffer. He did not suffer. He benefited in the past 5 years. That's why we could say the debt to GDP has gone down. It's gone down now to 61%, because while the overall debt has marginally reduced, yes, it's at 4.4 billion. It marginally reduced from the 4.6. The average income per person has gone up by over 60%. Even in accounting for inflation, that average income per person has substantially increased by near 40%. One of the areas of focus when we start looking at this particular loan motion has to do with an overall fiscal approach, an overall fiscal policy approach. Yes, to encourage the growth of the economy, and yes, to investment in the economy, investment in the people of Belize, investment that will take place in the form of investment in education, investment in health, and investment in infrastructure. All of these road works, road construction works, involve analysis. Analysis not just from the government, but analysis by the lenders themselves. To the extent, not as it relates to the design. Of course, the design is important, is critical, as Senator Pitt spoke to the various concerns. The design is critical. But the design, in fact, is impacted by the economic analysis, the feasibility analysis, the economic returns on the road works investment. Investment, not expenditures. These are investments, not expenditures. And in these investments, we have to look at what are the, what is the cost, what is the benefit, what are the net returns, the net economic returns of these investments. And coming up this highway, it's an old highway. It obviously needs work, it needs repair, it needs rehabilitation and improvement. But the sky is not the limit. We can do what we can afford. And as much as we would like not to have traffic in our way and have 4-lane highways, the economic analysis does not indicate feasibility for that kind of road construction. So the work does involve a financial and economic analysis that has to be undertaken before any decision is made as to whether a road work will be undertaken. And in connection with this analysis, the outcome of this analysis impacts on that design. So in terms of that loan motion, in terms of the highway, what is done is not a reactionary approach to the deterioration of the highway, but a plan. And in the case of the George Price Highway, that plan is for the rehabilitation of the entirety of the highway from Belize City to Belmopan. That is broken up in lots, and this is one of the lots from Democracia to Belmopan. But that analysis, both in terms of design and in terms of economic return, is done for the entirety of the highway. It is determined that it is feasible, it makes economic sense to rehabilitate the highway. Now, when we look at this specific loan and look at the specific lot from Democracia to Belmopan, the type of loan and the terms of the loan fit in perfectly with our fiscal approach. Our approach is that we at all times look at how we prudently manage the finances, including the debt. And that's where you can speak to how the debt has not increased by $2 billion or $1 billion. It has actually stayed flat, if not gone down. Now, what we are looking at this point then is the terms. When we look at the terms and when we look at our overall debt, the cost of debt in terms of external and domestic, we have been able to bring down the overall cost. In external, our overall cost of debt has come down to roughly 3.5%, and on domestic debt, it has come down to roughly 2.5% in the way that we manage the debt. Obviously, this fits in with that management plan, that debt management plan at 2%, and even if you add in the service charge at 0.5%, at 2.5%, that is in fact below our overall cost of debt. So that is how that makes sense in terms of financing these road construction works. Senator Pitt spoke about what is the costs associated with these road works, and specifically the Democracia Belmopan road works. The 12 or 13 million that is under this loan does not cover the whole amount of the projected estimate. I believe the project estimate for that lot is roughly 27.5 million US. So this represents a portion of it. The remaining portion will come from counterpart funding from the government itself, and the expectation that the Kuwaitis will in fact come in with a second loan amount that will make up the full balance of the project requirements. So that is the overall cost of this project. Now, in terms of what happens when this project is undertaken, there's an open tender, and there was an open tender for the procurement of the works by contract from eligible contractors in country. That was done, as far as I understand, was done over the past couple of months. And from that open tender, contractor was identified. That contractor will be responsible for the building of the entirety of the road. So there aren't many contracts that the government will be doing procurement for. They're not looking to do insurance, and those actually are handled by the contractor himself or itself. So that doesn't come into the realm of responsibility or direct responsibility of the ministry or the government, because it's the contractor that has the responsibility to conduct the works and to meet these requirements in terms of insurance, etc. So we're not looking at these individual components. It's the contractor that has that responsibility. On the area of transparency and disclosure, if I'm not mistaken, given the size of that contract actually will be tabled, if it is not yet tabled, at the House. So there will be open disclosure of that contract with the contractor. In terms of implementation of that contract, and the works being conducted, certainly on the financial end, the payments that come in and the payments that come in terms of disbursement, and then the debt servicing payments that go out are handled by central bank. So central bank posts on its website the various loans that the government has on a bilateral basis and on a multilateral basis. We have a very long-standing relationship with the state of Kuwait. I think the first loan that Belize contracted for was for the works at the building of the Philip Goldson Airport. Since then, they have done a number of other loan arrangements, including under the UDP administration, and that includes the Caracol Road. I think both phases 1 and 2. The Kuwaiti Fund was a co-finance partner in that project, and as well, I think, in the Hummingbird from Velmopan to Sibun. So these terms here are not new. These are familiar terms because in the long-standing relationship and an excellent diplomatic relationship we have with Kuwait, that they have always lent to us on a concessionary basis on those on similar terms as those. So both in terms of the financial terms and overall in terms of the specific terms that you referenced, those, as I understand it, are consistent. I don't know specifically. I understand it to be Tycrob and Sons, but I haven't seen the contract myself. But that's who I understand to be the contractor. So looking at the various items that you referred to, I don't know that there are many areas that I haven't covered, but at the same time, these are familiar provisions that have existed over time. When it comes to the environmental compliance plan, and noting what one of you had mentioned about the involvement of the lender, that is correct, that the lender is involved intimately in the process. So they would not, for example, release monies or disperse monies if there wasn't an environmental compliance plan in place. They wouldn't allow the signing of a contract without their non-objection. So they are intimately involved in that process. Sorry? As far as the axle load system, I don't know the details on that. I can't speak to that at this point. I would be guessing if I were to go into that. But definitely, in terms of process on disbursement, the Kuwaitis are in charge. It's their money, and they will release once they are satisfied with that process. But overall, given the terms of the loan, given the experience that we've had with the Kuwaitis, we look forward to continuing that relationship and continuing the development of this country, including through the investments in road construction works. Thank you.
Madam President, I thank senators who have participated in the interesting debate. As I stand, I still am not sure whether the senators opposite support the rehabilitation of democracy at the Belmopan.
We support the rehabilitation, but not the loan.
You listen to that? You listen to that? I will reserve my comment for later today about that type of behavior. Madam President, I ask that the question be put.
Honorable members, the question is now, therefore be it resolved that this Honorable House, being satisfied that the loan proceeds would significantly contribute to the enhancement of a major road network in Belize and improve the economic and social development of the settlements along the George Price Highway, approves and confirms that the government of Belize may enter into a loan agreement with the Kuwait Fund for Arab Economic Development on the terms and conditions set out above, and further authorizes the Minister of Finance to execute and deliver the said loan agreement and all other documents associated therewith, a copy of which is hereto annexed. All those in favor kindly say aye. Aye. Those against kindly say no. The ayes have it. I recognize the leader of government business.
Madam President, I move that whereas Belize is a member of the Inter-American Development Bank, the IDB, and the Inter-American Investment Corporation, IDB Invest, both being institutions under the IDB Group, and whereas the Board of Governors of the IDB and the IDB Invest on the 10th March 2024 adopted Resolution C11AG-5/24, which approved a US $3.5 billion general capital increase in authorized capital stock of the bank to enable the bank to support a new business model for the IDB Invest to carry out its developmental purpose and functions. And whereas in accordance with Resolution C11-AG-5/24, Belize is required to contribute to 113 new shares for IDB Invest expressed United States dollars at the rate of US $21,000 per share, amounting to a total of US $2,730,000. And whereas payment for these shares is to be done in equal annual installments over a period of 7 years, commencing 30th November 2025, with each annual installment payment totaling US $390,000. And whereas there is no specific provision in the International Financial Organization Act, Chapter 265 of the laws of Belize, or any other law to enable the Minister of Finance to subscribe to such shares or make such contributions, and whereas consequently the government of Belize is desirous of obtaining the approval of the National Assembly by way of a resolution for subscription and payment of Belize's additional GCI allocated shares of the IDB Invest, now therefore be it resolved that this Honorable House, being satisfied that the above-mentioned additional capital subscriptions would be beneficial to the interests of Belize in achieving better development outcomes, authorizes the Minister of Finance to sign the instruments of subscription and all other related documents and make payments before the indicated deadlines, a copy of which is hereto annexed.
I recognize the Honorable Patrick Faber.
Thank you, Madam President. So in effect, Madam President, they're asking us to subscribe $3.4 million in order to gamble that we'd be able to later on have investments made in our long-term development. There's no guarantee. That's why I say a gamble. But before I go there, Madam Speaker, because you'll understand that this is, in effect, borrowing, setting ourselves up to borrow, right? So all that I've said about borrowing, I'm not going to repeat it, but I'm going to make the case. But even before I go there, please let me say thank you to Senator Corey for being very candid and very open. That kind of openness we would never get in the House of Representatives. I agree. This is indeed the upper house. We may get all kind of spin at the lower house, and it is indeed refreshing to hear immediately the truth. Well, what I can, well, I shouldn't say, I shouldn't, let me not say that. Strike from the record indeed. Because Madam President, you see how I wish to strike the word truth? I can't say the opposite because it is unparliamentary. But let me put it this way. If spinning was an Olympic sport, my colleague over there would have a lot of gold medals. He took us back to 2008. Well, if you want to go down memory road, sir, let us go down memory road. Let us go back to 1998. Let us look at what the debt was in 1998. I refer you to the Free Belize Manifesto, your own document. And you open the document, and the first page of the Free Belize Manifesto, you read, it says, the national debt of Belize is a whopping $498 million, you know. And this is what the UDP left the country with, according to your own PUP manifesto. $498 million, $500 million, sir. So you tell me now what you did between 1998 and 2008 when you say that the national debt was 2.2 billion. You gone from $500 million to 2.2 billion. A difference of what is it? 1.7 billion with a B. But fast forward to your argument that the UDP, I'm sorry, that is 10 years, in case you missed the math, 10 years, 1.7 billion. And we could get into all of that. In fact, there were declarations by international firms that studied it, audited it, that tell you that millions just gone missing one who can't account for up to now. But let's look at what the UDP did, since you asked. I came across a little clip recently, came up in my memory on Facebook actually, where the Prime Minister, I think it may have been in COVID time because we were in the actual Independence Hill chambers, and we were behind the plexiglass. And the Prime Minister was actually having a candid moment. He was saying that the UDP, under my leadership of the Ministry of Education, borrowed money even when the country was in recession and gave the teachers raises and the public servants raises in 2012, in 2015, in 2017. And your famous line, all of the PUP administration, all the PUP people, they have gone on record repeatedly scolding the UDP over and over for spending $1 million a day. But they never fired a single teacher or a single public servant during COVID. That is how, it's not everything, certainly not everything, but that is just one tidbit out of how we got to some of that debt. Nothing like that ever happened in your time. Yeah, but I'm talking about you setting yourself up for borrowing again. That's where we are, and I'm trying to show you how my friend over there is the best spin doctor ever. Not yet. I'm graduating in August. Madam Speaker, Madam President, sorry. I leave all of that. Oh, but still, he spoke about GDP. He spoke about the debt. So, you know what he didn't tell us? He spoke about the debt being, or sorry, what is it? The debt to GDP ratio being 133%. And it dropping to 61%, you know what he's not going to tell you? He's not going to tell you that there was a rebasing of the GDP. He's not going to tell you that. He's not going to tell you that that is why it has dropped to 61%. He's not going to tell you that if you use the original way or what was used in 2020 to look at the debt to GDP ratio, that in fact what is today the case would be all around 130% debt to GDP. Well over 100% for certain. He's not going to tell you that if you look at what was in 2020 through the lens of what the new structure is now that you use for calculating GDP, that what was 133% in 2020 would look more like 75 to 80% debt to GDP today. That's not what my calculation is. He's not going to tell you these things. He's not going to tell you that growth that you boast about today, 8.5% growth, would be far less, something more like 5-point-something%. Yes. He's going to spin that. All of these things. You come and you talk about poverty reduction, you change the formula for calculating poverty, then you boast. But anyway, I'll get into that when the budget debate comes around. But let's get down, Madam Speaker, to Madam President, to IDB. This has to concern us that it concerns us from the position that, of course, you're making this investment. And I support what Senator Cowie says and the government does in terms of this being the best possible investment vehicle that you can use if you truly want to develop Belize and you don't have your own money. But why can't we try for once to use what we have at home? Why is it that we must always find ourselves borrowing? If you believe so much in the Belizean people, why do we have to always try to set ourselves up to do this? So, all in all, with these measures that we're taking, I believe there is another motion coming after this one to do pretty much the same thing. We're looking at almost, what is it, $10 million totally over the time period. There is no clear mechanism that we will be able to borrow. I don't know, Senator Cowie, what has been the track record. We're looking at MIF 4, is this? What has been our record in terms of the previous programs? How have we been able to benefit from them? What is it that we're giving up when we make these investments in these entities hoping to receive something back? How is this affecting what you can give to the teachers, for instance? You have said to the teachers, we don't have any money for you. We cannot afford to give you what you want. Is that an opportunity cost? Could these monies be used, for instance, to better handle our teachers and public servants? Definitely a consideration. I hope that you will support that, Senator Denison. The monies could be used for a lot of things that this country is in dire need of. So, Madam President, we need to better use the resources that we have, and we need to cut the borrowing out. This is setting the stage, in my opinion, for further borrowing, and we need to really put a clamp on the borrowing. This cannot be the way we move. Cannot be the way we move. And we see that this is a borrowing government. Borrowing government. So, I'll leave it there, Madam Speaker. Thank you, Madam President. Thank you.
Sorry.
I recognize Senator Sheena Pitts.
Thank you. You're such a gentleman, Senator Coy. Thank you. Both of them are gentlemen, actually. Yes, and he yielded. He's such a gentleman. Thank you. But and we do want to give Senator Coy an opportunity to respond because I do have some questions. And in true form, I'm here to seek some clarifications on it and point out what I've found in the papers supplied. Senator Courtney, I do understand that you experience a bit of disquiet when you don't know whether or not we support one way or the other. For this one, I have to say up front that I don't support it. The reason why I don't support it is because not now. Honorable Senator Faber pointed out that this is a buying into, setting ourselves up to borrow later. And so we are making money available. We're asking the people of Belize to make money available to put into a fund that there is no guarantee, even though putting into it we will have voting rights one way or the other, to put into a fund that we have no guarantee that we will immediately access to use for the people of Belize. The resolution CII-AG-5-24 at paragraph 2. And if I may be permitted to read. Identifies that the vision and business model for IDB Invest, including identification of sectoral needs related to the heterogeneity of Latin America and the Caribbean, and the financial, resource, operational, and institutional implications. Now, when you look at the table attendant, I think it is Annex A, you see the list of countries, the member countries, and the respective percentage and subscribed capital. And I can see a correlation between looking at disparateness and the respective countries, because if you look at that Annex A, you will see that not all countries are equally yoked and not all countries are being asked to put in the same amount. So thankfully, in relation to Belize, it's a subscribed capital of 0.08%. And that sounds like a little bit, it's really a little bit in comparison to countries like Brazil that is doing 12.48%, and Argentina. We have the United States putting in 15.05%. The weight of those other countries putting in, I mean, that's what it should be. So I'm not arguing with that. When I go further and I read, I look at the proposal, take into consideration fiscal resource, and it repeats it, operational and institutional implications for the new vision and business model for IDB Invest, including a continued ambition on strategic priorities, such as social agenda and formal employment creation, cross-cutting issues, and the impact of IDB Invest projects in all regional developing countries. B, alternative financial scenarios. C, the strengthening of governance and synergies with the IDB Group. And D, the independent review of multilateral development banks' capital adequacy frameworks commissioned by G20 countries in 2021 as may be applicable. So that is the scope of the IDB Invest objective. And reading all of them, 4 in total, I don't know that I can happily say that I can see how we should be buying into all four at this point in time. Remember, we're coming off of just discussing the Kuwait motion, identifying that we're putting people first, consistent with that, in putting people first, putting money into later on having to borrow. When we have more pressing issues right now, why are we securing monies for the future when we can secure the monies for teachers right now? So that is the basis for which I can't say that I support it. And see, the thing is, at page 2, paragraph numbered 5, it says, as established in the agreement, no member shall be obligated to participate in any part of the increased capital. We don't have to, Madam President. We are not obliged to. So why must we put ourselves in the shoe to earmark $2.73 million that can go towards increments, salary adjustments, and allowances? The thing is, Madam President, going through the documents, I can see that this is not one of those motions that is urgent, because the time frame that it sets out. And the thing is, which is odd, if we are to subscribe to this, I mean, the government has the numbers, they are to make available beginning November 30th, 2025, $390,000. We can, if going forward with this, we are able, we have the capacity to make available $390,000, but yet we are saying we can't find the money for pay teachers. I am struggling, honestly, genuinely, I'm struggling to understand how is it this is a priority in comparison to an urgent need right now. If this motion were to come next year, the following year, I wouldn't feel the way I feel towards it. And it's not that I am opposing it for any other reason than we can prioritize better with money that we're able to identify and earmark. Because it's not like we're going to get the benefit of the payments. And the thing I want to ask Senator Cowie, I know you don't like to be put on the spot so much, but this is really, yes, but this is really for my edification, because there are questions that arise, and I'm one of those persons, if I don't know, I will ask. I will not sit comfortably in my ignorance and pretend like I know or nod my head in agreement when things are flying over my head. So bear with me. Page 3 at paragraph 7. It contemplates an amendment to the agreement and regulations, and by vote up until September 1st, 2024. And I just want to know whether or not there was any such amendments as contemplated in that paragraph 7, page 3. And in support of my position that this is not urgent, this is not imminent, if you look at Annex A, 1A, it actually says, if I may be permitted to read, Madam President, allocation of subscription of new shares. A, 166,666 new shares have been allocated for subscription pursuant to this Annex A. Each member country will have until March 10th, 2026 to subscribe a number of shares equal to the number that results from multiplying that 166,666. The point I'm making is Why the rush? We have up until next year. And the agreement says that you begin to make your equal installments 30 days after you indicate that you're subscribing, and they become due and payable thereafter. But ultimately, you have up until March 10, 2026 to do so. So why do we have to do this now? If it is we want it, and I don't know what guarantee, I'm looking forward to hearing from Senator Cowie. Do we have any guarantee that a small country like Belize, responsible for 0.08% subscription, what are the chances of us being able to be first in time to access the benefit of this IDB Invest? I don't know. What makes us know that should we begin to pay, that puts us first in time to access it so that we could use it at least according to the terms, to the objective A, social agenda and formal employment creation. Like, there is, and it is because I have a risk aversion. Let me tell you, I'm one of those persons. I don't take risks. I don't believe in borrowing. It's just against my grain. And perhaps I have one of my clients who tell me, I just afraid for money. Be that as it may. The fact that I am unable to see, ascertain, or learn what our immediate return or benefit will be is what makes me so uncomfortable. And I wish either Senator Courtney or Senator Cowie could help me understand that we do this now. You provide whatever justification you have for doing it now, as opposed to dealing with the teachers' issues. And I hear KHMH, they're kicking up. Yeah, you all have the storm ahead are brewing, and you know, it's stated, the Prime Minister knows. So I would like to understand, really, genuinely, no cynicism, how is it that we can prioritize, earmark, having the ability to earmark this amount of money to put into IDB Invest above and over what is emergent right now for Belizeans? And how is it, do we know that putting this in makes us first in line, first in time to access, to do the things that this motion set out to accomplish? Thank you, Madam President.
I recognize Senator Christopher Cowie.
Thanks, Madam President. I'll try and be brief on this. On IDB Invest is the private sector arm of IDB. So the government is not looking to borrow from IDB Invest. This is actually to enable financing of private sector investors in Belize. So this is actually to enable better access to finance for Belizean investors in our economy. So I think we needed to make that quick clarification on what this resolution or motion is about. It's a subscription motion for investment in or further investment in IDB Invest by the country of Belize, just like all the other countries that you see in that table, in accordance with the ratio of our interest in that entity. Now, IDB Invest has been around for however many decades, but IDB Invest was not active in Belize until actually the past 4 or 5 years. I think one of their first investments was in the National Gas Company let's say 5 years ago, about 5 million. But since then, they have lent to the private sector to the tune of over $100 million US. So that in effect is investment in the country. That's the equivalent of foreign direct investment in the country through IDB Invest. That reflects the confidence that IDB Invest has in business in Belize. So this subscription motion here is a commitment coming out of the Board of Governors meeting in March of last year in the Dominican Republic, where it was voted upon to further capitalize IDB Invest so that they can make further both debt and equity investments in member countries, including Belize. So this was something that was voted upon. Belize is committed to it. And yes, there is a timeline involved. I think the letter you are looking at is from April of 2024. But there is a commitment that by June of this year, Belize would subscribe, but the payments would not be made until a period of over 7 years, roughly $390,000 per year.
Madam President, just to add to what Senator Corey indicated, this is designed to support and facilitate the private sector of Belize. In addition to the National Gas Company, $30 million US has been loaned to Belize Electricity Limited to assist it in its adaptation to climate change, to electric vehicles, and to restoring some of its infrastructure. Another $30 million US was loaned to Atlantic Bank Limited to support medium and small enterprises. $5 million to Marie Sharp for her to retool and to expand her operations. Make no mistake about it. The senators on this side support the Belizean private sector. Make no mistake about it. We will continue to facilitate investment by the private sector by making concessionary loans available from IDB Invest. We will do it again and again and again in the interest of the Belizean people. And those, Madam President, who stand in opposition to this motion today will have to answer to the Belizean people. When the private sector is not thriving, Belize is not thriving. When the private sector is not investing, Belize is not growing. And we on this side, Madam President, make no apology for this motion. As to the timing of when the payment is made, I have heard senators on the other side say repeatedly, and we just to come up to 2 hours and we not start the thing yet, that they said now pay the teachers. I like Trump the talk, fake news. It's sung to me like the Donald. We got the Patrick. But we have time to get into that debate in a short while. Madam President, this is good for Belize, and we ask that the question be put.
Honorable members, the question is, now, therefore, be it resolved that this honorable House, being satisfied that the above-mentioned additional capital subscriptions would be beneficial to the interests of Belize in achieving better development outcomes, authorizes the Minister of Finance to sign the instruments of subscription and all other related documents and make payments before the indicated deadlines, a copy of which is hereto annexed. All those in favor kindly say aye. Aye. Those against kindly say no. The ayes have it. I recognize the Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I move that whereas Belize is a member of the Inter-American Development Bank and by virtue of its membership, Belize has the right to benefit from the bank's multilateral investment fund, which was established for the purpose of supporting economic growth and poverty reduction in its member countries. And whereas there has been successful establishment and implementation of MIF-1, which was later replaced with MIF-2 and subsequently MIF-3, which is currently ongoing and was recently renewed until 12 March 2026. And whereas the member countries of the bank, in recognition of the vital role of entrepreneurial innovation in addressing development challenges, fostering opportunities for poor and vulnerable populations, catalyzing dynamic economic growth, mitigating climate change, and advancing gender equality and diversity in the Latin American and Caribbean region, agreed to the establishment of the fourth multilateral investment fund, MIF-4, in a sum of US $400 million. And whereas the Board of Governors of the bank on the 10th of March 2024 adopted resolutions AG 8/24, CIIA/AG-6/24, and MIF/DE-7/24, which approved the establishment of the MIF-4, which shall govern the assets and liabilities of MIF-3 and support the continuation of its activities through the purpose stated above. And whereas, as per the norm, this replenishment of the MIF will be made up of contribution commitments by donor member countries of the bank, and whereas Belize has allocated a contribution to MIF-4 is US $691,699.60 to be paid in 3 equal annual installments of US $230,566.53, of which the first installment will be due and payable on July 2025. And whereas there is no specific provision in the International Financial Organizations Act, Chapter 265 of the Laws of Belize, or any other law to enable the Minister of Finance to make such contributions, and whereas consequently the Government of Belize is desirous of obtaining the approval of the National Assembly by way of a resolution before making such contributions, now therefore be it resolved that this Honourable House, being satisfied that the above-mentioned contributions to MIF-4 would be beneficial to the interests of Belize, authorizes the Minister of Finance to sign an instrument of acceptance and contribution and all other documents associated therewith, a copy of which is here to annex.
I recognize Senator Sheena Pitts.
Thank you, Madam President. Just some quick questions I'd like for Senator Cowie or Senator Courtney to provide. It says it's to support economic growth and reduce poverty. Have we already identified what those programs are? And, you know, what are the ramifications, specifications of those programs, implementation, that sort of thing? And it speaks to the assets and liabilities of MIF Fund 3, but what are those assets and liabilities of the MIF Fund 3? Thank you, Madam President.
I recognize Senator Christopher Cowie.
Yes, thank you, Madam President. This MIF is another arm of the Inter-American Development Bank Group. Really, the role of the IDB or the MIF is really known as, conduct its operations as the IDB Lab. And as IDB Lab, it largely provides technical advice, technical support on a grant basis to private sector business. This is also not for government. This is to help support the development of small, medium-sized businesses through technical support and advice with grant support and technical assistance. In terms of its assets and liabilities, it as a part of the IDB group, it really is it is consolidated within that group. So their balance sheet is basically part of the balance sheet of the IDB group.
Sorry.
Senator Janelle Chanona.
Good morning, colleagues. And let me take this opportunity to welcome our new colleagues. At the last occasion, I had the benefit of my former teacher as leader of opposition business. Now I have my former classmate and a former teacher. 30 years this year, Mr. Wade, Senator Wade. But yes, no, I appreciate the new dynamics and look forward to working with all of you and getting to know each of you as you bring your interventions to the floor. Just to share on this point in terms of the MIF, in my capacity as a NGO advocate, we were the benefit of one of these programs for technical cooperation in terms of getting financial support for identification of traceability of seafood. So physical cameras being attached to boats so that you can then scan a QR code at the restaurant and then see your fish coming out of the water, see that fisherman's story, see that link. And I think at the time the IDB president called it Uber for fish. And so they really embraced that concept. And certainly I think we benefited, and the Fisheries Department has said in the past how important these technical cooperation insights and expertise and experiences benefit our decision making going forward, and we see the potential of making sure that we know why we're doing what we're doing and how we can capitalize on something as simple as traceability in seafood, because we know how important that is to the sustainability efforts. So just wanted to contribute that in terms of the support for these type of technical cooperation opportunities for private sector as well as the NGO community.
Madam President, I thank Senator Chanona for her informed and accurate contribution. I ask that the question be put.
Honorable members, the question is now, therefore be it resolved that this Honorable House, being satisfied that the above-mentioned contributions to MIF4 would be beneficial to the interests of Belize, authorizes the Minister of Finance to sign an instrument of acceptance and contribution and all other documents associated therewith, a copy of which is hereto annexed. All those in favor kindly say aye. Aye. Those against kindly say no. The ayes have it. I recognize the Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I move that be it resolved that this House approves the expenditure of $2,595,089 from the official Charities Fund as detailed in Appendix A of the draft estimates of revenue and expenditure for the year being ending 31st March 2020. Madam President, I ask that the question be put.
Honorable members, the question is, be it resolved that this House approves the expenditure of $2,595,089 from the official Charities Fund as detailed in Appendix A of the draft estimates of revenue and expenditure for the year ending 31st March 2026. All those in favor kindly say aye. Aye. Those against kindly say no. The ayes have it. I recognize the Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I move that whereas Section 3.1 of the National Assembly Staff Act, Chapter 14 of the Substantive Laws of Belize, Revised Edition 2011, establishes a National Assembly Staff Committee consisting of the Speaker of the House of Representatives, or in her absence, the Deputy Speaker, 3 members of the House of Representatives, the President of the Senate, and 1 other member of the Senate nominated by the Senate, and 1 member of the staff of the National Assembly, or 1 other person who is not a member of the staff of the National Assembly, nominated by the staff of the National Assembly. And whereas Section 3.1c of the National Assembly Staff Act, Chapter 14 of the Substantive Laws of Belize, Revised Edition 2011, provides that the President of the Senate and 1 other member of the Senate nominated by the Senate shall form part of the National Assembly Staff Committee. Now, therefore, be it resolved that this Senate nominates Senator the Honorable Brittany Galvez to be a member of the National Assembly Staff Committee.
I recognize Senator Patrick Faber.
Madam President, before I say anything, let me say that I don't know personally Senator Brittany Galvez, and I'm sure that she's a lovely person. Has nothing to do with her. But I would want to know how was it that we got to Senator Galvez to be nominated to be the representative for the staff committee? Was there a process? Was there some kind of democratic process among senators in this House? And if not, what is the process that can now be employed for us to properly select democratically who the senator that will represent us in the staff committee? What can that process be? Because this to me seems to be ramrodding or a representative on us when we did not have an opportunity to make a selection, and I think that we ought to have had that. Thank you.
I recognize Senator Glenfield Dennis.
Madam President, I align very strongly with that sentiment. No personal ill feelings. I have stood here and critiqued the appointment procedure for no less than the Auditor General. The staff of the National Assembly is very near and dear to me. They function in a way that has been extremely professional, and I have never found anything short with those staff, and such an important committee I think warrants a sort of ventilation, even if, I don't know. That, I yield, Madam President.
Madam President, has there been I don't recognize an amendment to the motion. I ask that the question be put.
Honorable members, that motion is referred to the Constitution and Foreign Affairs Committee for examination, consideration, and report. I recognize the Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I move that whereas Belize signed the agreement between Belize and the Benelux states on the exemption from visa requirements for holders of valid diplomatic passports on 6 May 2025 in Brussels, Belgium, and whereas the purpose of this agreement is to strengthen and further develop friendly and cooperative relations among the countries, and whereas within the framework of this agreement, holders of valid diplomatic passports will be exempted from visa requirements to enter the territories of any of the other parties to the agreement, and whereas the government of Belize is desirous of ratifying the agreement pursuant to Article 12, and whereas Section 61A(2)(a) of the Belize Constitution, as amended by the Belize Constitution 6th Amendment Act, provides that the Senate shall authorize the ratification of any treaty by the government of Belize. Now therefore be it resolved that the Senate authorizes the government of Belize to ratify the agreement between Belize and the Benelux states on the exemption of visa requirements for the holders of valid diplomatic passports, a copy of which is hereto annexed.
I recognize Senator Sheena Pitts.
Thank you, Madam President. Senator Courtney, I support this. I start by saying that I support it. And I only would have wished the good senator were still in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, because I am aware that the good senator did some work in trying to get Belize to the level where travel would have been a bit hassle-free for Belizeans, for those of us who have for those of us who have passports, and this one is for those of us who have diplomatic passports. But in the beginning, the preamble, it seems like it limited the movement of holders to external frontiers, but I'm sure when I read through it, it appeared that it permitted movement throughout the Benelux states. So if there is some clarification to be made that external frontiers means a particular thing and that movement is limited to that particular thing. Please share that with me. And then, you know, like all Belizeans, we want more. You give an inch and we try to take a yard. And so I'm asking Senator Courtney to convey whether or not through the exchange of diplomatic note, we could indicate that we would be interested in seeking whether the provision for visa waiver could be extended to students. I mean, because the reality is what's going on in the US or Belizean students may have to begin to now go to Europe for studies. And so if there is a possibility for us to ask in the event, because I do know there are Belizeans who go that far for education. Matter of fact, I have a cousin that far. Another question I'd like to ask is whether or not through diplomatic note we could ask for the amendment per Article 12. And then crave your indulgence, Madam President. The only other minor query, because it's not major, looking at Article 8, whether or not or whether it would be hereafter that we supply through diplomatic channels the respective specimens of the passports. And this may seem simple, like why do we have to provide this in an agreement? But I've had a real experience traveling where immigration officials insisted that my passport is not the passport from the country I come. And so when I saw that article there, I understood, as simple as it is, why it is necessary. So in support of this, all I would like to ask is whether or not through diplomatic note we could engage them mutually, since that is provided for, whether we can engage them to extend it to other classes of citizens who would need to travel to Benelux states for legitimate reasons and not only diplomats. I yield, Madam President.
I recognize Senator Denison. Enfield?
Obliged, Madam President. Just a quick note on the little engine that is the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. I know that Senator Courtney has first-hand experience how hard-working the staff there are, even though they are little in number and have to work 2 and 3 desks and so. So I wish to commend the staff there. I take this opportunity to acknowledge their hard work and dedication to the development of the country of Belize, and to acknowledge my friend who we are losing in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs for familial reasons, but it's someone that I thought, had we had a less politicized system of elevation in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, that person would have naturally rose up the rank to the highest levels of that ministry, including the level of permanent secretary if we had it. The Kisenokal name, right? She's watching. Tasha, you all right? Tasha works hard, Mr. Courtney. So I want to join. I just want to join because that is the exact point that I have. The class of passports, if we can look at expanding that. I'm not sure what the rationale was for it being limited to diplomatic passports. I'm open to hearing if there was a specific rationale for it, and then what would be the reasons why it couldn't be extended. That is all, Madam President. I yield.
Madam President, first of all, the first question posed by Senator Pitt, I have not been able to find the reference to the external frontiers that you mentioned. I don't know exactly where that is. Yes. Right. So, recognizing that the Benelux states are acting jointly under the convention between the Kingdom of Belgium, Grand Duchy of Luxembourg, and the Kingdom of Netherlands on the transfer of control of persons to the external frontiers of Benelux territory down at Brussels. First of all, there is something called the Schengen area, which is, say, a number of the member states of the European Union, not all of them, which have a system under which they operate control at their borders. You cannot enter the Schengen area without a Schengen visa, which is a visa that entitles you to enter any of the Schengen area countries and Switzerland. One. Two, what the preamble is referring to, Senator Pitt, is the agreement under which these three countries, Belgium, Netherlands, and Luxembourg, agreed to have joint control and management at their borders with any external country. So they have that agreement. With respect to the Schengen visa waiver, the Schengen system is operated by the European Commission. Member states of the European Union, member states of the Schengen area retain right, power, and authority to enter into agreements in relation to diplomatic passports only. Any other type of passport, official or ordinary, is controlled in Brussels. It is controlled not only by the member states, the Commission, but also the Parliament, the European Parliament. And therefore, for there to be a waiver or any exemption relating to any passport other than a diplomatic passport, it's a process in Brussels. And that is the process to which Senator Pitt referred, that we have conducted a campaign to seek to get the visa waiver in relation to all passports. We were only able to get this, and there are other countries, for example, Hungary and a couple others in the European Union, where we do have the waiver for diplomatic passports. But that is because we can do so on a bilateral basis and have that negotiation with them. The campaign continues for the Schengen visa waiver for all passports for the entire Schengen area. It is not easy, as you are aware. The current climate in the developed world is very much anti-migration, and the whole notion that you would be allowing another country right of access, the citizens of another country right of access into the European Union, perhaps now is not the time to actually put that to a vote. That being said, what we have been told, and this has been confirmed to Minister Fonseca and to the Prime Minister, is that insofar as the criteria exists for qualification for the Schengen visa waiver, Belize ticks all the boxes. So it's a question of timing. When is the appropriate time, having regard to the politics in the European Union, in the Schengen area, that we will advance that process. I can assure this Honourable Senate that our ambassador and her staff in Brussels, Ambassador Avila, and as Senator Dennison indicated, here at home, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs continues on a very clear path and a very intense campaign with friendly countries in the European Union seeking to arrive at their point which will be propitious for us to ask the Parliament, to ask the Commission and individual member states to grant the visa or consider the visa waiver. So insofar as students are concerned, you have to await when we are able to get a wider visa waiver. With respect to Article 8, yes, the new e-passports have been sent, samples have been sent to the Benelux countries. They have them as samples, so you should not run into any problem when you next arrive. Thank you, Madam President.
Honorable members, that motion is referred to the Constitution and Foreign Affairs Committee for examination, consideration, and report. I recognize the Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I move that whereas Belize signed the agreement between Belize and the Benelux states on the readmission of persons residing without authorization on the 6th of May 2025 in Brussels, Belgium, and whereas the purpose of this agreement is to promote cooperation and communication between the parties to better execute the laws and regulations on the circulation of persons, underscoring the obligation of a party to readmit its nationals notwithstanding the legal migration status, and whereas the agreement is a prerequisite for the agreement on the exemption of visa requirements for the holders of valid diplomatic passports between Belize and the Benelux states, and whereas the parties' interest in fulfilling the obligation under international law to readmit their own nationals, in particular Article 12, Paragraph 4 of the International Convention on Civil and Political Rights, and whereas the government of Belize is desirous of ratifying the agreement pursuant to Article 19, and whereas Section 61A(2)(a) of the Belize Constitution, as amended by the Belize Constitution and Sixth Amendment Act, provides that the Senate shall authorize the ratification of any treaty by the government of Belize. Now therefore be it resolved that this Senate authorizes the government of Belize to ratify the agreement between Belize and the Benelux states on the readmission of persons residing without authorization, a copy of which is hereto annexed. As it says, Madam President and members of the Senate, this agreement commits Belize and Benelux states to accept their nationals if they're found residing unlawfully or unauthorized in one of the member states of the European Union or in Belize. The purpose is clear. If they are granting a waiver, they want to ensure that you comply. For example, under the waiver, you have a maximum of 90 days. If you overstay, they want an assurance that the government of Belize will accept someone coming, and they, on the other side, will take their nationals if they are here unlawfully. It's a matter of management of migration in the respective countries, and it's a companion to the agreement with the Benelux on a visa waiver. We would have to do the same on a Schengen for a Schengen waiver.
Honorable members, that motion is referred to the Constitution and Foreign Affairs Committee. You wish to?
Just one short point, Madam President, but I am not strident against you already in your wrapping up. So,
No, go ahead.
thank you most kindly, Madam President. I have to say that on this side we support this. The readmission go hand in hand with the earlier motion, but I like the way diplomats phrase things. They call it readmission, not deportation. So we are signing on to this agreement and considering that it's really effectively deportation. I trust that our diplomats know that they are not to cost the country of Belize any expense to be readmitted back home for them staying out of time. We're all responsible people. And the thing is, I find this most useful and helpful because sometimes especially if you're traveling perhaps on official business and that crosses over with vacation. I can see how someone could end up inadvertently staying over their time. And it is good to know that there is an agreement that will not treat any diplomat in any hostile way other than to ensure their safe readmission back into their country. So I'm rather pleased to see something like this going hand in hand with the previous motion. I yield, Madam President.
Honorable members, the motion is referred to the Constitution and Foreign Affairs Committee for examination, consideration, and report.
Bills for second reading.
I recognize the leader of government business.
Madam President, I wonder if before we start the debate on the bills, if we could suspend for just perhaps 10 minutes?
Certainly. I accept your second, Senator Chadora. The Senate is suspended for 10 minutes.